In June 1890, Vincent van Gogh completed a portrait that would become one of the most enigmatic works in modern art history. It shows a melancholy man leaning his head against his right hand, staring past the viewer with a look of profound weariness. The man was Dr. Paul Gachet, the physician tasked with caring for the artist during the final turbulent months of his life. When the portrait was painted, Van Gogh described Gachet as a fellow sufferer, writing to his brother Theo that the doctor seemed just as ill and distracted as he was. At first glance, the painting is simply a masterpiece of expressionist emotion, a raw capture of late 19th century despair. Yet, embedded within the composition is a subtle detail that has sparked decades of debate among art historians and medical experts alike. Resting on the red table in front of the doctor sits a small branch of a plant with purple blossoms. It is Digitalis purpurea, commonly known as foxglove. Before looking at the terrifying medical coincidence behind this flower, it is essential to understand who Dr. Gachet was. He was an eccentric physician, an amateur painter, and an early advocate of alternative remedies. He was particularly interested in homeopathic treatments for nervous disorders and heart conditions. In the late 1800s, foxglove extract was widely prescribed for heart problems, but it was also used to treat epilepsy and severe depression. It was a potent substance, one that required precise dosing, as the line between a therapeutic remedy and a toxic poison was dangerously thin. What Dr. Gachet may not have fully realized were the specific visual side effects caused by high doses of foxglove toxicity. Medical research has since shown that digitalis poisoning can induce a rare visual condition called xanthopsia. Patients suffering from xanthopsia experience a distortion of color vision where the world around them becomes heavily saturated in shades of yellow and yellow-green. In severe cases, people report seeing glowing halos or radiant rings around light sources. This scientific fact opens a chilling question when looking back at Van Gogh's late period. During his final years, Van Gogh's palette shifted dramatically toward intense, almost blinding yellows. His iconic sunflowers, the swirling golden halos of the starry night, and the glowing yellow skies of his late landscapes were all painted in the very period he was under Dr. Gachet's care. Van Gogh died by suicide in July 1890, just weeks after completing Dr. Gachet's portrait. Did Van Gogh choose to paint the foxglove simply as a symbol of the doctor's profession, or was it a quiet, unconscious clue left on the canvas? Was the brilliant, luminous yellow that defined Van Gogh's late masterpieces a pure breakthrough of artistic genius, or was it the physical consequence of a medicine meant to save his mind? The web of coincidences surrounding this portrait, however, does not end with the artist's death. In fact, the painting's journey through history became just as surreal and tragic as the life of Van Gogh himself. In 1937, during the rise of Nazi Germany, the portrait was confiscated from a museum in Frankfurt as part of the regime's campaign against degenerate art. It was purchased by a private collector, only to be bought decades later, in May 1990, almost exactly 100 years after Van Gogh painted it, by the Japanese businessman Ryuhei Saito for a record-breaking $82.5 million. At the time, it was the most expensive painting ever sold at auction. In an astonishing turn of events that shocked the art world, Saito, facing public criticism and massive tax liabilities, publicly declared his intention to have the masterpiece cremated and buried with him upon his death. He claimed he wanted to save his heirs from paying crippling inheritance taxes, but many saw it as a dark, obsessive echo of Van Gogh's own destructive spirit. Saito died in 1996, and while the painting was thankfully spared from his funeral pyre, it vanished into secret private hands immediately afterward. To this day, its exact location remains completely unknown. We may never know with absolute certainty if the foxglove in Dr. Gachet's hand was a quiet killer or an unwitting muse. Nor do we know where the canvas rests today, but the portrait remains a disturbing bridge between art, medicine, and human fate. A painting born in total obscurity, linked to a toxic cure, and destined to disappear from the world twice over.